President Trump delaying the 50% tariff on the European Union until July 9th. With insight to the president's plan and much more, National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Good to have you on,
hey,
Kevin. As always, the way we intro that, it's like, oh, yeah, the 50% tariff on the EU. Today's Tuesday. We didn't even hear about that until the show on Friday. Right. So things move fast. I guess there's time dilation is a fact in general relativity. But these are moving very quick. Can you tell me what was happening before Friday between the EU and the U.S. that obviously got the president's dander up to just come out on a social post in kind of shock and awe of the markets on Friday? What was happening? How intractable were those negotiations?
Yeah, they're kind of intractable. You know, I've been involved in those negotiations when they're in D.C. with Secretary Lutnick and Jamieson Greer. And I got to say that there's not a lot of movement. There was not a lot of movement coming into the week. And as your pet economist, Joe, one of the theories I had of what was going on is that, like, the UK deal was actually pretty easy to negotiate because the UK had some specific stuff they really cared a lot about, like autos. We had some stuff we really cared a lot about, like they hadn't allowed our farmers to ship stuff to their country. And so the deal was kind of easy to make. Well, you get your thing, we get our thing, and so on. But in Europe, they got all these countries, and each country has a different objective. And they have to aggregate these objectives at the EU. And so while we've been not making the progress we wanted to see, you can sort of understand that they've got a problem where they can't make up their own minds. And so I think having a little bit of a deep breath and waiting for them to figure out what they want, then that should help the negotiations. But the bottom line is, across all the countries, I expect we'll probably see a few more deals even this week. There's some stuff very close to finished, and it's up to the president, of course. But in the end, the other thing I would say is that you should expect the best out of these deals. President Trump wants to put America first. He understands that our trading partners want to put themselves first, and he wants them to be second in our affections and America first. And the things are moving forward very quickly. And I think EU is actually about the toughest nut to crack amongst our allies because of the sort of aggregation of preferences problem.
Is it all about tariffs? Is it about non-trade protectionist policies? Yeah. And I guess, but you got how many countries did you say? So it could be a little of each from, you know, it sounds like obviously it's not monolithic. And I don't see how you figure it out by July 9th, Kevin.
Well, the non-tariff barrier issue, for example, there are simple things that we've been trying to do and have been succeeding to do with other countries where we just sort of say, hey, you know, if a car is okay for us to run on our roads and your cars are okay for you to run on your roads, then why don't we, like, acknowledge that your regulations are okay for cars and our regulations are okay for cars? You can acknowledge that, and then we could just move our cars around without lots of costly retooling. And that's the kind of thing that we're shooting for. And then there's a lot of countries that are like, okay, sure. But then with Europe, it's not quite so easy.
So you figure the phone call over the weekend, she just said, cool your jets, Mr. President. Let calmer heads prevail. We're going to try and come together. No specifics on concessions yet. It's just like, let's put this on pause and see what we can work out. Is that what happened?
Well, one of the things I've seen happen, too, is that the president is forming really strong, tight relationships with the leadership in these trade negotiations. And so I think it was almost like friend to friend. Okay, fine. Okay. You want some time off. You can have some time off. I think it was probably not more reasoned than that. That's, I trust you. Okay. You're a good partner. I'm really enjoying our relationship together. Let's try to fix this.
We were already talking about off-ramps on Friday. Right after they announced, we're talking about off-ramps. And we're trying to figure out an off-ramp for Apple. It'd be a $3,000 iPhone if they tried to make everything here.
$3,500.
$3,500 for a good one, for the kind you'd like, probably, Hassett. But what's the offer?
I'm a smoke signal kind of guy.
What's the supply? Yeah, what's the supply chain issue? I mean, what is Tim Cook supposed to do?
Right. Well, you know, we'll see how it works out. But the bottom line is that what we're trying to do is onshore as much as we can in the U.S. and make it so that the U.S. is not hyper-dependent on imports from China.
Right.
And so I think that one of the things we're seeing is that people are moving way faster than you might expect. If you look at the 20% equipment investment in the first quarter before the tariffs even came in, with supply chains moving fast, and just-in-time inventory management, and AI, I think you're going to be astonished at how quickly stuff moves onshore.
But Kevin,
and that's what we're shooting for. And in the interim, then we'll see how it works out. But they need to move their stuff onshore as much as possible to make it so that the U.S. economy is secure and not prone to Chinese extortion.
But Kevin, I did some reporting actually on the Apple issue over the weekend. Actually wrote something in DealBook this morning about it, which is, what do you think about the prospect if Tim Cook were to come to you and say, look, we obviously can't move everything in 12 months. It's just not going to happen. Maybe we can start to move things over several years. In the meantime, we could try to assemble more of the phone in the United States. So you could actually write on the phone, assembled in the United States, or potentially, depending on what you think the merits of it are, made in the United States, maybe at their Texas facility or something else, but with a longer-term plan of maybe 5 or 10 years, frankly, of being able to actually manufacture the phones here. If he were to come to you with something like that, do you think that then there would be a reprieve for the next couple of years as they get their house in order? Because clearly it's almost, just from a physical standpoint, impossible to move everything overnight. And the damage it could do to the company overnight is obviously tremendous.
Well, it is impossible to move things overnight. But one of the things we're seeing, I was joking with a person who does bond rating in the U.S. in my office a few weeks ago, and one of the things that happens at the Director of National Economic Council office is that CEOs line up in my office. I'm kind of like the person in an airplane that's getting walloped over the head by everybody, where everybody says, oh, like, we're never going to be able to do anything if we have this tariff. It's going to be a disaster if we have this tariff. And then my friend who's a bond rater said, actually, they come in and they tell me the opposite because they don't want the bonds to be downgraded. And so the point is that everybody is trying to make it seem like it's a catastrophe if there's a tiny little tariff on them right now to try to negotiate down the tariffs. And so in the end, we'll see what happens. We'll see what the end game is, but we don't want to harm Apple. And in the end, if you think that Apple has a factory someplace that's got like a set number of iPhones that it produces and it needs to sell them no matter what, then Apple will bear those tariffs, not consumers, because it's an inelastic supply.